Do you want to start winning every single fight on the Brigantine and Sea of Thieves so you can get win streaks like this?
Nice.
Well then listen up, because this golden bucket skeleton is about to give you a rundown on the secrets of the Brigantine, so you, yes you, can begin winning fights left and right the second you're done watching this video. If you want to continue to lose the majority of your fights and never go on crazy win streaks, click off this video right now, because it's not for you. But if you've got a heart of fire and you want to start crushing your opponents, make sure to watch the entirety of this video. And I mean the whole thing. Because to be a good Brig player, you need to know every secret and tip I'll be talking about, as well as how to play as every role, which will be mentioned during this video. Because in certain situations, each person on a Brig may need to change their role mid-battle. Anyways, without further ado, I now present to you
the ultimate Brigantine PvP guide.
For starters, when playing on a Brigantine, you need to understand that there are 3 roles which you and your teammates must fill in order for you to fight effectively. The first of the 3 roles is the Helm, who is the person that keeps the boat operational, by steering it as well as bailing and repairing it. Next up, we then have the Cannoneer, which is the person that uses cannons to damage the enemy as well as immobilize them. And last but not least, we have the Flex, who is the person that gives an extra hand wherever needed, whether it's shooting cannons or bailing and repairing the boat and so on. First, let's talk about the Helm. We'll start with the basics of what you need to be doing, and then we will talk about what to do in more specific situations. First off, you shouldn't be touching the cannons as Helm, unless your Flex or Cannoneer tells you to do so. They may do this because they are dead, or they can't access their cannon because they're off the boat, and so on. You have a few different jobs as the Helm, such as making sure that your Cannoneer and Flex have angles on the enemy boat. This includes keeping the wheel repaired so that you can maintain the angle. Another is to repair the boat as it takes damage, as well as bail the water out. And you also have to keep your back mast up and repaired. Now you're probably thinking that that's a lot for one person to do. And you would be correct, because keeping an operational brig as the Helm isn't the easiest job. But to make it easier, let's talk about how you should prioritize all of these jobs. Your main priority should be keeping a cannon angle on the enemy's boat for your Cannoneer and Flex, because if you don't, you are making them unable to do their jobs. Keeping angle also includes prioritizing repairing the wheel. If the wheel being damaged means you're unable to keep cannon angle on the enemy, then you need to repair the wheel so you can keep the cannon angle for your teammates. Cannon angle should always come first, unless you are super close to sinking, and I mean very close. Don't prioritize bailing and repairs if you only have a little bit of damage in your boat and a little bit of water. Only prioritize bailing and repairs if you are super close to sinking. Then you can prioritize bailing and repairs over cannon angle. The same goes for keeping your wheel repaired. Keeping the wheel repaired should be the second main priority, unless you are super close to sinking or are still able to maintain cannon angle with a broken wheel. If you're about to be sunk, obviously you need to prioritize bailing and repairing your boat, even if it means potentially losing angle for a second or having a broken wheel, because at least there's a chance you can regain angle after saving yourself from sinking. But if you can still maintain angle on the enemy boat with a broken wheel, prioritize everything else on this list of priorities instead of repairing your wheel. The next priority after keeping cannon angle, as well as keeping your wheel repaired, is keeping your backmast operational. If your backmast is broken and falling, make sure to keep it up unless that means losing cannon angle or sinking. Now you're probably wondering, what do I do if I'm about to sink and my backmast is falling down? Am I supposed to just let it fall? No. This is when you need to communicate to your Flex and tell them they need to quickly bail the boat so you guys don't sink while you catch the backmast. Communication is key here. The reason you should get the Flex to bail in this situation is because they are closer than the Cannoneer to bucket the water out of the boat, and because since you are near Helm, you are closer to prevent the mast from falling down than anyone else on the boat. The only time you should prioritize bailing over saving your mast from going down is if your Flex is dead or off the boat and unable to bail the water while you are close to sinking. As long as angle is able to be maintained for the Cannoneer while the Flex is dead, you can let your backmast fall and bail while your Cannoneer puts cannon pressure on the enemy. But if cannon angle can't be maintained while your Flex is dead, call the Cannoneer over to bail while you save the backmast from falling. Now let's talk about your last job priority as the Helm, which is keeping the hull of the boat repaired. Which may sound weird, but if you don't prioritize all the other things, you'll end up in a bad position with lots of holes anyway, which will get you sunk. The only time repairing the hull of the boat should be prioritized over repairing the wheel is if while your wheel is broken you are still able to maintain cannon angles on the enemy boat. Then you can prioritize getting the hull repaired instead of the wheel so you don't have to deal with as much bailing later on. And the only time repairing the hull should be prioritized over quick water bails is if you have enough time to repair the holes without sinking while your Cannoneer and Flex still have shots on the enemy. Repair should be kept up with at any time you have free time as the Helm. This means if your Cannoneer and Flex have angle on the enemy, as well as if your backmast isn't falling, and if you don't need to immediately repair your wheel so you don't lose angle, you should be getting repairs done instead of just sitting on the wheel. Making sure you are keeping up with repairs at any time possible will help prevent you from eventually getting overwhelmed and sinking. Right away here, I'm going to provide you with a general priority rundown list based off some certain common situations which you may find yourself in. As well, later on in this video, I'll be going over a much more advanced explanation of everything, so make sure you stay tuned for that. For now, let's start with the general priority breakdown list. Just to sum everything up so you can easily come back to this video and get a quick priority breakdown. Let's start with a breakdown of the Helm's priorities if their boat is fully operational, which means there's little to no hull damage, as well as little to no water in the boat, all of the teammates are alive on the boat, and your backmast is up. If this is the case, your first priority should be keeping cannon angle. Your second priority should be keeping your wheel repaired. Your third priority should be keeping your mast up. Your fourth priority should be keeping your mast repaired. Your fifth priority should be shooting at enemies in order to try to kill them. Your sixth priority should be keeping the hull of your boat repaired. And your last and seventh priority should be bailing the boat. Now let's talk about if your boat is hurting, meaning there's lots of hull damage and water, but everything else is operational. Let's start with what to do if your boat is about halfway sunk with a medium amount of holes. Your first priority is keeping cannon angle, and your second priority is keeping your wheel repaired, which you may think is weird because you are slowly sinking, but if you need to keep cannon angle or need to repair your wheel, then you call your flex over to do the bailing as well as the hull repair for you. But if you don't need cannon angle and don't need your wheel repaired, then you yourself can do the bailing and repairing, with repairing the hull being third priority and bailing being the fourth priority. Then after that, we have keeping up your mast as the fifth priority, then repairing your mast as the sixth priority, and then shooting enemies as the seventh priority. Now let's talk about what to do if your boat is hurting very bad, but everything else is fully operational. And when I say very bad, I mean about 3/4 of the way sunk with a lot of holes to the point where both you and your flex need to be bailing and repairing. If this is the case, both your first and second priority should be bailing and repairing. And if you have time in between the bailing and the repairing, try to quickly shoot enemies to confirm a kill. This should be your third priority. During the whole time that both you and your flex need to be bailing and repairing, the Cannoneer should be trying to keep their own angle, as well as repairing the wheel if they need it to get angle. Once the bailing and repairing the hull is no longer a two-man job, meaning that you occasionally have a tiny bit of time to leave your flex alone while you go and do other jobs, and then you come back to do the bailing and the repairing, then your fourth priority is keeping cannon angle, your fifth priority is keeping your wheel repaired, your sixth priority is keeping your backmast up, and your seventh priority is keeping your masts repaired. Now let's talk about what to do if your boat is operational, but the players on it aren't. This means that you have little to no hull damage, as well as little to no water, but one or two of your teammates are dead, but luckily your backmast is still up. Let's start with what to do if one of your teammates is dead. If this is the case, your first priority should be keeping cannon angle, your second priority should be reviving the dead teammate, your third priority should be keeping your wheel repaired, your fourth priority should be keeping your mast up as well as repaired, your fifth priority should be trying to shoot enemies, your sixth priority should be keeping the hull of your boat repaired, and your seventh priority should be keeping your boat bailed. Now what if your boat is fully operational but both of your teammates are dead? If this is the case, you're going to want to make your first priority be reviving one of your teammates, and then the second priority should be getting cannon angle for the teammate that you just revived, and then the third priority is reviving the second teammate. After this, your fourth priority is going to be repairing your wheel, your fifth priority is going to be keeping your back mast up, your sixth priority is going to be shooting at enemies, and your seventh priority is going to be both repairing the hull of your boat and bailing. Now lastly, let's talk about how to prioritize if your boat is mostly operational, meaning there's little to no hull damage and water in your boat, all the players are alive on your boat, but your backmast is falling down and is fully broken. If this is the case, your main priority should be keeping your backmast up. But if keeping the backmast up means that you're going to start to lose cannon angle on the enemies, then you need to call your flex over to keep cannon angle. Once your backmast has been saved from falling, your second priority becomes keeping cannon angle, your third priority becomes repairing your wheel, your fourth priority becomes repairing your mast, your fifth priority is shooting enemies, your sixth priority is keeping the hull of your boat repaired, and your seventh priority is keeping your boat bailed. Now that we've covered the general priority breakdown list, we have two more things to cover for the Helm before we then get into an advanced fight breakdown for the Helm. These two things are covering the loadout the Helm should use, as well as covering how they should communicate with their team. Let's start with talking about Helm Communication. The first thing the Helm should be communicating to their team is the movement state of the boat so that their Cannoneer and Flex can hit good shots. This includes calling out the position of the wheel as well as the sails. For the sails, this will look like saying raising back sails to half, or dropping back sails to 3/4. And for the wheel, the Helm will call out the direction they were turning as well as how many degrees in intervals of 90. This will look like saying turning the wheel 90 degrees to the left, or turning the wheel fully to the right. By the way, the wheel of the brig turns 1.5 times fully in each direction, so 540 degrees in each direction. As well as communicating all of this to the Cannoneer and Flex, a helm should also be communicating things such as when they themselves are away from the wheel to do things such as repair and bail, or grab supplies, or maybe they got knocked off the boat. This needs to be done so the Flex can know if they might need to slightly adjust the wheel because their helm is busy. Another thing the helm needs to communicate to their team is when to raise and drop the front sail, and who should do it. If the helm has nothing to do and no priorities, they can adjust the front sail themselves while the Cannoneer and Flex stay on cannons. But if the helm is busy and has other priorities while both the Cannoneer and Flex are shooting cannons at the enemy, the helm should tell the Flex to adjust the sails while the Cannoneer keeps up pressure. The last main things a helm should be communicating are miscellaneous callouts. These include callouts such as they themselves dying so their Cannoneer or Flex can potentially revive them, if there's a dead enemy that they killed with a sniper shot, if they're saving their mast, if their wheel is broken, and if there's an enemy trying to board the boat, as well as if they have it covered or not. Speaking of dealing with enemy boarders, let's talk about what weapon loadout a Brigantine helm should use. As the Brig helm, you should be using the blunderbuss and sniper, or the sword and the sniper. Why? Well, you should always be using the sniper because it's good for long range and trying to kill people on the enemy boat while your Cannoneer and Flex are shooting cannons and you have nothing else to do. If you want to use the blunderbuss, you should use it because it's good with dealing with enemy boarders, as it does a lot of damage and does good knockback to get them off your ladder. And the reason for choosing the sword is that it can help you better maneuver at the bottom of your boat while it's very full of water so that you can quickly make it to hard to access holes towards the front of your boat while your Flex worries about bails and repairs towards the back. You can do this fast maneuvering with the sword by holding block with it while continuing to jump in the direction you want to go, and it'll speed you up a lot underwater. I'll show you the regular sword hopping as well as a comparison of doing it underwater versus not doing it underwater, all while I tell you about the exclusive club which you should join, which is the Bucket Chat Army. You can join it by clicking the join button near my channel name on this video. While I talk about the exclusive perks which you can get if you join the Bucket Chat Army, I'm going to show you the sword hopping. Starting at only $5 American per month, you can join the Bucket Chat Army. Doing this will give you a really cool exclusive loyalty badge which will show up beside your name in the comment section as well as in the chat of live streams. This badge will level up and change the longer you stay subscribed. You'll also get access to really cool custom emojis. Keep in mind I'll add more as we get more members. You'll also get access to exclusive members only polls where you can vote on things such as how to decide the direction of where my YouTube channel is going. This can include stuff like what kind of videos to make. As well, you'll get access to members only community posts, which will include stuff such as channel updates, behind the scenes, and so on. Also, you'll get priority reply to comments, meaning that I'll prioritize replying to your comments over everyone else and having a chat with you. All of that for only $5 American a month. I mean, in today's economy, that's like the price of a hamburger. And if you want to spend a little more money, there's some more membership tiers with even more perks, such as shouting you out in my videos, giving you access to monthly exclusive custom wallpapers which I'll sign for you, adding me on Discord where we can have private conversations, and lastly, gaining the ability to play Sea of Thieves with me. So what are you waiting for? Instead of putting on extra weight with that one extra cheeseburger, join the Bucket Chat Army today.
It'll help fund me being able to get out more banger videos like this one.
Oh yeah, and also like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. As well, if you've made it this far into the video, leave a comment saying Bucket Chad's on top. Now back to the video, where we're going to be talking about an advanced fight breakdown as the Helm. First off, if you're not doing Hourglass PvP and you come across a random fight, try to engage the enemy by giving your Cannoneer and Flex an angle on them, and then go from there. But if you are doing Hourglass PvP, then it gets a lot more complex. When doing Hourglass PvP, you and your enemy spawn face to face. Before you even spawn in, you want to be ready by the wheel, so you can immediately start turning it all the way to the right the second you spawn in on an enemy. But why turn to the right? Well, there's one main reason to turn to the right instead of the left. And that reason is that when your back mast falls, it falls to the right and blocks the Cannoneer's view if they were to be on the right side. The front mast falls to the left, but it doesn't block the cannon's view. So this means that you want your Cannoneer and Flex to be shooting from the left side of the boat. So you turn to the right. Unlike how on the sloop where the left side of it can only take 7 holes instead of 8 like on the right, the brig has 9 potential holes on both the right and the left side, making the position of how your mast falls the only real reason to engage enemies with the left side of your boat. Also, speaking of the sloop, I have 2 very advanced sloop guides, one for solo slooping and one for duo slooping. You can check them out through the links in the description once you're done watching this video. Now that you know why to turn to the right at the start of the fight and have the enemy on the left side of your boat, don't worry about your sails because your Cannoneer and Flex will do that for you, which I'll talk about later in the video. You'll want to maintain a cannon angle for your Cannoneer and Flex to do as much damage as possible while you try to snipe the enemy to potentially get a kill to give you guys an advantage. Speaking of advantages, let's start talking about winning positions. Then after that, we'll talk about neutral and losing positions, and what puts you in them, and how you need to handle each scenario as a Brig Helm. Whoever gets a kill or kills on the enemy, gets the enemy's mast or masts down, or gets the most holes on the enemy while the enemy doesn't meet any of this criteria, will be in a winning position, meaning they have the advantage in the fight and need to capitalize on it. Now let's talk about what to do in different winning positions as the Helm. Starting with what to do when you get a kill on the enemy. If you or your teammates do this, you need to make sure the enemy's teammates can't revive the dead player. As the Helm, this means trying to snipe the other alive enemies to put pressure on them, making them unable to revive and potentially killing the second or third player as well. If the enemy can't revive their teammate, they will be a player down for a while and in most cases will try to get away, or they will choose to stay and fight, which will leave you with a large advantage by being up a player. While they are down a player, this leaves an easier opening for your Cannoneer or Flex to immobilize the enemy boat by more easily being able to get their mast down because of the temporary split boat management the enemy has to deal with. Now let's talk about the next winning position, which is getting the enemy's mast or masts down. Whether your Cannoneer or Flex was able to fully break the enemy's mast without you guys needing to kill an enemy player, or got it broken because you guys did kill an enemy player, you're now in a winning position. Once the enemy's mast or masts are fully broken, you and your team now need to not let the enemies repair their mast, and will want to get them to fully fall. If one enemy mast gets broken, maintain cannon angle for your Flex and Cannoneer, and let them know to try and get the second mast fully broken, because it will become difficult for the enemy to try and maintain keeping both masts up and operational. If the enemy wants to keep both of their masts up, they will have to be down a person cannoning temporarily because of 2 out of 3 of their players having to worry about keeping their masts up. During that time, you guys will have double the cannon firepower and can start to overwhelm the enemy boat. Or, the enemy will have to make the choice that firepower is more important and will let one of their masts fall, so that they can keep 2 people on cannons. If they choose this option of letting one of their masts fall, that means it'll be harder for them to escape later and they have to commit to a fight that they have a losing position in. While your Cannoneer and Flex are worrying about immobilizing the enemy, you as a Helm should be trying to snipe the enemies to either get a kill to put you at an even better advantage, or even if you are just doing damage to the enemies, you are forcing them to heal with food, which makes them unable to do their duties such as steer the boat or shoot the cannons while they are healing. I'd recommend trying to shoot the enemy's people on cannons instead of the enemy's Helm, because of the fact that people on cannons will be standing still more often, meaning it's easier to hit shots. As well, if you do hit shots on the people on cannons, during the time they have to get off and heal, your 2 people on cannons will have more firepower than the enemy. Plus, in many cases, your Flex and Cannoneer will be aiming their cannon fire towards the enemy's cannon line, meaning they will have potentially already gotten cannonball damage on them, meaning that if you hit a snipe on the enemy Cannoneers, they're more likely to die because they're already damaged. Basically, at this time when you're in a winning position and your Cannoneer and Flex are worried about fully immobilizing the enemy, your job is to just be a pest while continuing to keep up with your priorities. On top of your Cannoneer and Flex getting you into a winning position by fully breaking both of the enemy's masts, if you manage to get a kill on the enemy, your team will be in a double winning position, because of the fact that the enemies are in the process of being fully immobilized while they're also down a player. Once your Flex and Cannoneer have gotten the enemy fully immobilized with both of their masts down, you'll want to slow down your boat and start to rotate around your enemy. Doing this is called a Death-Spin and allows for your Cannoneer and Flex to shoot cannons at the enemies trying to raise and repair their masts, as well as put holes in all sides of their boat, all while you circle around them. Once you're in a Death-Spin, you need to let the boat pilot itself and circle around the enemy while you help your Cannoneer and Flex by continuing to shoot sniper shots at the enemies, and at the same time maintain your priorities to keep your own boat operational. If the enemies try to match your Death-Spin so your Cannoneer and Flex can only get holes on one side of the boat, then you as the Helm should stop the boat by fully raising the sails and straining your wheel to keep a broadside on the enemy while they continue to spin. While doing this, tell your Flex or Cannoneer to try to break the enemy's wheel with cannonballs so that they won't be able to keep making only one side of their boat exposed by matching your broadside. As a Helm, your Death-Spin should always be counterclockwise because of the fact that you are always trying to engage the enemy on the left. If your Death-Spin is counterclockwise and the enemy is fully immobilized, think of it like this. If the enemy is also spinning counterclockwise, stop the boat. But if the enemy is spinning clockwise, keep the Death-Spin going. And if the enemy is not spinning at all, also keep the Death-Spin going. Doing all of this while having a counterclockwise Death-Spin on the enemy will make all sides of their boat exposed to you at the fastest rate possible, so that your Cannoneer and Flex can get maximum hull pressure on the enemy. But if for some reason you ended up engaging the enemy on the right side of your boat because of unforeseen circumstances, do the exact opposite. This means your death spins will be clockwise instead of counterclockwise. So if the immobilized enemy is also spinning clockwise, stop the boat. If the enemy is spinning counterclockwise, keep the death spin going. And if the enemy is not spinning at all, then keep the death spin going as well. Now to talk about the winning position where you just have more holes on the enemy than they do on you. Same as the other winning positions, you need to shoot sniper shots at the enemies to put yourself in a better winning position, while also waiting for your Cannoneer and Flex to get the enemy's mast fully broken. While shooting over sniper shots, make sure to continue to maintain your list of priorities so you don't fall behind. Now let's talk about what to do in neutral positions as the Helm, meaning both teams have the same number of dead players, both teams' masts are in the same condition, both teams have the same kind of hull damage on each other, or both teams do or do not have cannon angle on each other. So basically, it's anytime it's an even playing field for you and your enemy. If you and your enemy are both fully repaired with no one on your team dead and both teams have their masts up, you need to try to get yourself into a winning position by doing what I mentioned in the Helm fight intro as well as the Helm priority part of this video. But let's say you're in a neutral position where both teams have one player dead. They were unable to revive their teammate and you were unable to revive one of yours as well. If this is the case, you should always try to prioritize cannon angle for your teammate unless it means you will sink. But if you and your enemy are both sinking badly as well as each having a dead player, you need to worry about repairing and bailing your boat while also trying to help your other teammate on cannon if possible, just so you can overwhelm the enemy while you wait for your third teammate to respawn and take control of the cannon back. If you're sinking so bad that you can't also help your teammate on the cannons, then just commit to bailing and repairing while you wait for your teammate to come back. But if you and your enemy are both doing alright on repairs as well as having a dead player, just prioritize cannon angle and let the boat autopilot itself with cannon angle while you hop on the cannon and try to keep up pressure on the enemy boat with your other alive player while you wait for the one dead one to respawn. Getting this extra cannon pressure on the enemy can put you into a winning position. Now let's say you're in a neutral position where both you and your enemy have the same amount of masts fully broken. If you both have one mast broken, first thing you want to do is make sure you're of course maintaining cannon angle on the enemy boat so your Cannoneer and Flex can potentially put you in a winning position by getting kills on the enemy or by putting way more holes into them than they have on your boat, or by getting the enemy's second mast fully down. While they are doing this, just maintain your priorities and get some sniper shots off at the enemy. If you have angle on the enemy and you aren't sinking very fast while having one broken mast, you need to try to keep your one broken mast up and repair it to get it operational again. But if you are sinking bad, you may need to let the mast fall and get some repairs done so you can be in a winning position by having less holes than the enemy. If you need to let the back mast fall is when you should tell your Flex or Cannoneer to drop the front sail, and if you need to let your front one fall, that's when you yourself should drop the back one. Once a few of your enemies die, or they have so many holes that they need to panic save their boat while your boat isn't getting that hard pressured by the enemy, is the time when you can finally re-raise one of your masts while your Cannoneer and Flex keep up the pressure. Once your mast is back up and running, you will go from a neutral position to a winning position, and you'll need to maintain your priorities while also telling your Flex and Cannoneer to get both of the enemy's masts down so you can obtain a better winning position. If you and your enemy both have each other's masts fully broken, prioritize cannon angle. If prioritizing cannon angle means your back mast will fall, so be it. Just make sure to tell your Cannoneer and Flex to save the front mast so you can still be moving after it's repaired. But if cannon angle is able to be maintained while both masts are fully broken, try to save the back mast by grabbing it on the side of the boat away from the enemy. Now, since both you and your enemy have both masts fully broken, your team needs to make a decision. Remember, as the Helm, you make a lot of the calls for your team because you can see the most of what's going on at once usually. As I already said, when both masts are fully broken, you as the Helm need to try to keep up at least the back mast while your Flex and Cannoneer maintain pressure. But you have to decide if you want to keep up the front mast as well. Let's talk about how you can make that decision. Let's say while both you and your enemy have both of each other's masts fully broken, your enemy decides to let one of their masts fully drop. If this is the case and you only see one mast being kept up by the enemy, look towards the cannon line of the enemy and make a call out based on how many enemies are cannoning. If two enemies are on cannon and one is keeping a mast up, tell your Flex and Cannoneer to keep up the cannon pressure and not to worry about letting your own guys' front mast fall. As both you and your enemy will only be rocking one mast anyways, you'll be evenly matched, because you're going to be keeping up your back mast while you make this call. You do this because in this moment, if you decided to tell your Flex or Cannoneer to save your front mast, you'll only have one cannon fighting two cannons from the enemy and can easily start to get overwhelmed. during the time that the flexor cannoneer is worried about catching a mast. If the enemy has one mast falling, one mast being saved, and only one person on cannon, call out for the flexor cannoneer to save the front mast from falling, but also tell them to not worry about repairing it, and instead just hop right back on cannon to keep up the pressure after they've saved the mast from falling. They'll do this while you as the helm both save and repair the back mast so you can get moving again. During this time where either your cannoneer or flex saves the front mast from falling, there's even cannon pressure from both sides, but you gain the advantage by having a mast up, which won't need to be picked up later by yourself, and only needs to be repaired to become operational again. Now let's say both you and your enemy have both of each other's masts fully broken, but the enemy is trying to keep up both of their own masts. Obviously prioritize cannon angle first, then try to keep at least one mast up so you can still be mobile. That means you as the helm keep your back mast up and try to get it operational by repairing it. But while you do this, you can tell your flexor cannoneer to save the front mast from falling but not repair it. Because the enemy is saving two masts, they'll have one person on cannon max during that time that your flexor cannoneer saves the front mast from falling. So the fight is evenly matched. And once your guys' front mast is saved, the person who saved it can hop back on cannons and pressure the enemy. From this point, the fight will either continue to be evenly matched with 2 cannons versus 2 cannons, or the enemy might only have 1 cannoneer while they're worrying about repairing their mast, meaning that your flex and cannoneer can then overpower the enemy with a 2v1 on cannons. But let's say both you and your enemy have both of each other's masts broken, and you're both hurting with a lot of holes in water while close to sinking, and the enemy is trying to keep up both of their masts. If this is the case, call for your cannoneer or flex to save the front mast so it can maybe become operational again at a later point, while you go and bail and repair the boat, while letting the back mast fall. Yes, doing this will make you be down a mast, but you'll have overwhelming firepower. Because of 2 enemies saving a mast and the other one doing bails and repairs, you'll have 1 cannon versus no cannons, which will continue to put the enemy in an even worse position. What if you're unable to do all of this though and find yourself in a losing position? A losing position is when you don't have cannon angle on the enemy but they do on you. You have more dead players than the enemy, your masts are broken or knocked down but the enemy's isn't, or there's more holes in your boat than there is in the enemy. Let's start with talking about what to do if the enemy is able to cannon you but you can't cannon them. If this is the case, obviously you need to get angle as fast as possible, but if you can't do that because your wheel is completely broken, you'll need to focus on getting the wheel repaired as fast as possible. But if you can't repair the wheel because the enemy is hitting it repeatedly, there are 2 things that need to be done. If your boat is pointed away from the enemy, you and your teammates need to all snipe at the enemy to try and get a kill so that you can have some pressure taken off of you to get things operational again. Try to call out who to shoot at as a team so you can insta-kill them. If your boat is pointing at the enemy, you can harpoon a player onto your boat and get a quick kill on them, or just do the method I just mentioned with the triple sniping. And if your boat is spinning out, anytime you don't have cannon angle, try to triple snipe the enemy, and anytime you do have cannon angle, get your flex and cannoneer to cannon the enemy while you continue to snipe. Now let's talk about what to do if you yourself are down on players. If the enemy has killed one teammate, you first off need to make sure that the other one still has cannon angles to keep up the pressure while you revive the dead teammate. But if both teammates are dead, then try to pull away from the fight so you can revive them. Then come back to the fight once you're fully operational again. If you are unable to pull away because your masts are down, then try to get off a revive. And then worry about cannon angle so that the player that you just revived can keep up pressure. Once you have cannon angle, you'll then go to revive the second player. But let's say you're anchored. Then you should worry about reviving both players, and after you revive them both, you can try to get your anchor up while they keep up the cannon pressure if they have angle. But if they don't have angle, then they can help you get the anchor up as well, in order for you to get them angle. Now what do you do as the helm if your mast or masts have fully broken or have fallen down completely but the enemies have not? If the back mast is fully broken, try to keep it up at all costs, but don't lose cannon angle or sink by doing so. If you will lose cannon angle or sink by saving the back mast, you can call over your flex to either adjust the wheel to keep cannon angle or to bucket and repair for you so that you guys don't sink, while you save the mast. If you both need cannon angle and to save your boat from sinking while your back mast is going down, you should worry about cannon angle and call over your flex to worry about the repairs and the bails while you let your back mast fall to keep angle. If your front mast is falling and you yourself have no urgent priorities, then go and save the front mast from falling and get it repaired, as long as doing so means not sinking or losing cannon angle. But if you do have urgent priorities, then use the logic from the neutral position helm section of this video to decide if you tell your cannoneer or flex to save the mast or not. Specifically, go to the part where I talk about masts being broken or falling. You should be able to find that through the chapters on this video, which are on the play bar or in the description. This applies to any combination of mast drops, even if both masts are dropping. Now let's talk about if you get into the position where both of your masts are fully dropped. Realize that even though it's bad because there's a very slim chance of escape, you can still win the fight. The key to winning is syncing your movement with the enemy so you always have cannon angle on them. This will allow your Cannoneer and Flex to return the pressure and potentially put you guys in a neutral or winning position by knocking down the enemy's mast, killing a player, or by putting a ton of holes into them. As well, this will also make most of the enemy's cannons hit one side of your boat, so you have to deal with less holes while trying to recover. While this is going on, you need to be sending over sniper fire if your boat isn't badly damaged, and if it is, you need to be getting repairs on the boat and should be repairing the holes that are on the opposite side of the boat than the enemy first. Once you get yourself into a neutral position while your masts are down, try to get yourself into a winning position, and if you can get into a winning position, that is then your chance to get your mast or masts back up and going again. Don't worry about re-raising the masts until you're in a winning position. Prioritizing a fallen mast while in a neutral position will often get you put back into a losing position. While you're in a losing position, if your harpoon has angle on the enemy boat, you can also try to harpoon an enemy player to kill them and get yourself into a neutral position. Try to coordinate with your teammates to make sure the player actually dies though if you are doing this, because doing this in a losing position is a risky move and could get you anchored or killed if you aren't careful. If you ever end up in a very bad losing position where your masts are fully down and you're almost sunk, just make sure cannon angle is always facing the enemy by syncing the turn of the wheel so your team can return the pressure while you repair and bail the boat. But if your masts are down, you're almost sunk, and your wheel is broken so you can't keep broadside, you and your teammates need to focus on bailing and repairing the boat while trying to target a specific enemy to snipe. Make sure you coordinate this with your teammates so the enemies don't have a chance to heal, as well as try to kill the people that try to revive their dead teammates. If you can do this, there's a good chance you can recover the boat and get yourself into not as bad of a losing position, and potentially even a neutral position. But if you don't get a kill in this kind of situation, I almost guarantee you will sink. And that's why you as a Helm need to utilize all the tips I mentioned in this video so far so you don't end up in that position to begin with. Now finally, it's time to talk about the Cannoneer role. We will start with the basics of what you need to be doing as the Cannoneer, then we will talk about what to do in more specific situations. As the Cannoneer, you stay on the cannon for the most part unless told otherwise. Your jobs as the Cannoneer are to sink the enemy by putting holes in their boat, immobilizing their boat, and killing enemies with cannonballs, as well as boarding the enemy vessel. Let's start with talking about how you should prioritize all of these jobs as the Cannoneer. Starting with your main priorities, which should be immobilizing the enemy. You do this by getting their mast down, which makes them a sitting duck and unable to run away. As well, your other main priorities should be killing the enemy, so that gives you an opportunity to immobilize them. Putting holes in the enemy should become a priority once you have immobilized the enemy. If you're unable to do any of these because your enemy has turned away to run and repair their boat, you need to try to shoot yourself out of your cannon and board the enemy boat to get their anchor down so that your Helm can come over there and sink them with you. This is your last priority. Overall, the priorities of a Cannoneer are pretty simple, but the jobs themselves are what's difficult. We will get into much more detail on the specifics of what to do during fights soon enough, but first, let's talk about how the Cannoneer should be communicating with their team. The Cannoneer doesn't need to give as many calls as the Helm, but they still need to give some to have a well-structured team. As Cannoneer, you need to let your Flex and Helm know where you're trying to hit the enemy's boat, whether you're trying to kill their Cannoneer or their Helm, hit the enemy's wheel, get their mast down, or if you're aiming to get holes in the enemy. This all needs to be communicated so the Helm and Flex both know how they should do their jobs. For instance, if you're about to fully break both the enemy's masts, the Helm needs to know this so they can slow down the boat and get ready to death-spin the enemy. Another important thing you need to communicate is if at any point you're getting off the cannon for whatever reason it may be. You should also tell your team when you are getting back on the cannon so that your team knows when you aren't helping with other things and are going to be putting pressure on the enemy. If you're unable to put pressure on the enemy because you don't have cannon angle on them, this also needs to be communicated to the Helm so that they can get you angle. If you decide that you're going to try to board the enemy, make sure to communicate this to your teammates so that they know that you're off the boat. Some extra things to keep in mind are to call out when you're dead, when there's an enemy boarder, when you're getting off cannon to heal, and when you have fallen off the boat for some reason. As well, communicate if you are harpooning an enemy player onto the boat. Do this so that your teammates can react to having an enemy on the boat if you accidentally miss your shots on the enemy and don't kill them. Speaking of killing enemies, let's talk about what weapon loadout you should use as a Cannoneer. As the Brigantine Cannoneer, you should be using the blunderbuss and the sniper. Why? Well, because the blunderbuss is good for doing high damage to enemies that you harpoon onto your boat before they can react, as well as dealing with boarders by having a lot of knockback. And the sniper is good for long range for trying to kill people on the enemy boat if you don't have cannon angle. Now let's talk about what to do to start fights. If you're not doing hourglass PvP and come across a random fight, wait for your Helm to get you cannon angle and go from there. But if you are doing hourglass PvP, it gets a lot more complicated. Before you even spawn in, you want to be ready by one of the front sail length adjustments, with your Flex ready on the other length adjustment of the front sail. But why be here and not on the cannon? While your helm is starting to turn the boat to the right, you immediately want to start raising the front sail all the way with your flex so you can turn nice and tight. Once the front sail is fully raised, immediately run to the back sail and raise it to half with your flex. Then you yourself will get on the frontmost cannon and your flex will get on the backmost cannon and go from there. The reason you go on the frontmost cannon and your flex goes on the backmost cannon is because this means that the flex will be closer to the stairs so they can more easily help the helm bail and repair when needed. Your main goal as Cannoneer at the beginning of a fight is to kill an enemy player with your cannonballs so that you can get an advantage. Kinda like here where I get 4 kills because I also worry about suppressing the revive. Then from there, try to demast the enemies with either 1 chain shot per mast or 3 cannonballs per mast, so they can't run away easily to revive their dead teammate. And if on top of that they're demasted, they'll now have to take a fight that you have a winning position in. The best way you can balance getting the mast down of the enemy as well as getting kills on the enemy is by communicating with your flex and deciding that one of you will focus for kills and one of you will focus for getting masts down. In the clip that's playing right now, we both started with being focused for kills. Then my teammate got 1 kill, so I decided to go for chain shots, and I got another kill as I was going for chain shots, so then I decided let's take down both masts, and now they're down 2 players and down 2 masts, putting the enemy in a really bad losing position and me and my team in a really good winning position. Speaking of winning positions, let's talk about those. Whoever can get a kill on their enemy, get their enemy's masts or masts fully broken as well as down, or whoever gets the most holes on the enemy will be in a winning position. Let's start by talking about what to do as the Cannoneer while in the winning position where you have a kill advantage. Right after getting a kill is when you or your flex should start aiming to demast the enemy. If the enemy tries to revive their dead teammate, you need to communicate with your flex for one of you to continue going for demasting while the other one suppresses the dead body of the person, meaning if anyone is trying to revive that dead player, you try to kill them. If one of you can suppress the body while the other one fully breaks the enemy's masts, the enemy will be in a very tough situation because they will only have 2 players alive with 2 masts falling down. This means that if the enemy wants to keep up both masts, they'll have 0 cannon pressure firing back while you overwhelm them. In most cases, the enemy will try to save 1 mast while the other person stays on cannon, so this means you get a free mast fully dropped while only having to deal with 1 person on cannons, so you have a free mast and double the cannon pressure, all because of getting just 1 kill. At this point, you should keep aiming to kill the last 2 players and try to make the second mast drop fully as well. You can do this by communicating with your flex for one of you to target the 1 Cannoneer left while the other targets the person trying to keep up a mast. Basically, just keep on trying to kill the enemies with cannonballs while also distributing damage and immobilizing them, so that you can get in a good winning position. Let's talk about if there's no enemies that are dead, how you should get their mast broken and then fully fallen down. To get the enemy's mast down, you'll need to hit either 1 chain shot per mast or 3 cannonballs per mast on it before it gets repaired. After you have a mast broken, you can't let the enemy stop it from falling down, so you need to shoot shots towards the area where you lower and raise the mast of the boat to knock the enemy away from it and hopefully get it to fall. Communicate with your flex who will shoot shots towards people trying to catch and repair the mast, and who will try to get the other mast down so you can optimally make the enemy struggle. Ideally, you want to get both masts fully broken at the same time so that the enemy has to decide if they want to be down a Cannoneer temporarily or if they want to let 1 mast fully fall. Either choice they make gives you an advantage. Even if the enemies do catch their masts, they're still going to be in a losing position because they aren't going to be mobile until they repair their masts, which will make them unable to run away from the fight. If the enemies do catch their masts, you or your flex need to try to kill the people repairing or catching the mast with cannonballs, as well as hitting the mast with cannonballs to make it start falling again, every time the enemy gets a repair off on it. This will get the enemies stuck in a vicious cycle of trying to save their masts. At some point, they'll have to give up because you or your flex is going to be pressuring the masts while the other one is slowly distributing holes throughout the boat. And eventually, they'll become a sitting duck with both of their masts down. Communicate who keeps up the mast pressure and who goes for kills on the enemy with your flex. Then if both masts are down, whoever was the person going for kill pressure keeps on going for kills, and the person who is going for mast pressure goes for hole pressure. There should always be one person prioritizing aiming for kills while the other person tears apart the enemy boat bit by bit. Now let's talk about boarding while in a winning position. If the enemy is running, go for boards, because in most cases if they are trying to pull out of the fight, they're in a losing position. When the enemy is running, your main goal as a boarder should be to get the enemy's anchor down so that your helm can catch up to them and keep up the pressure. While doing this, also try to get some kills. If the enemy is trying to grab and save their anchor from dropping, you can spam blunder bombs at it to knock them all away. The other time to go for boards is when in a strong winning position. This means the enemy is fully demasted and down 1+ players, while also having a lot of holes. As well, your own team's boat is very mildly hurting, meaning you have all of your players alive and not much hull damage. Even if both of your masts are fully down, as long as the enemy is in a much worse position than you, can be the optimal time to board. A good way to decide if you should board is to ask your helm if they are in a position where they could take over your cannon while you go to board. And if they could, then you are fine to board. If all this criteria is met, then there is no reason for you not to board. So shoot yourself over to the enemy. Since in this case the enemy is already fully immobilized, don't prioritize going to drop their anchor. Instead, prioritize killing another player. Do this because you only have so much time until the dead player respawns. So take the opportunity to have a 1v2 instead of a 1v3. You're probably thinking though, even a 1v2 sounds bad because they have double the people. It's actually not though, because you're going to tell your helm and flex to shoot cannonballs towards the ladder which you are boarding on if there's enemies trying to guard you, as well as shoot cannonballs at the stairs where the enemy is bucketing their boat. This will make it easy for you to get up the ladder, and the enemies that were bucketing their boat will already be damaged from cannonballs. Plus, the two enemies will be trying to save their boat. You should easily be able to get at least one kill because the enemy is already being damaged from the cannonballs, as well as being distracted trying to save their boat. After you get that one easy kill, it's now a 1v1, while the last guy has to both try to bucket their boat so it doesn't sink, as well as fight you, which puts them at a major disadvantage. Meaning, this 1v1 is heavily favored to you, especially with your teammates shooting cannons towards the stairs of the brig, where the last guy is bucketing. Even the initial 1v2 is in your favor if you play it right, but now the 1v1 is even more in your favor if you can make it a 1v1. If you can win that 1v1, the enemy will probably already be sunk, or the first guy who died before you even went into board will be respawned, making it another 1v1 in your favor. The enemies will now have staggered spawns because they won't want to wait to respawn together or else their boat will sink. So now you will most likely have 1v1 or 1v2 fights that are in your favor while your teammates continue to apply pressure to the enemy until they sink. But let's say you die while going in for a board and you don't get any kills. Well, that's the exact reason why you make sure your team is in a way better position than the enemy before doing so. Because you know that even if you die, your helm and flex are still keeping up cannon pressure and overwhelming the enemy, while the enemy also has a dead player. Then if you want, you can wait to respawn, then go in for another board, or as you're about to respawn, tell your flex to go in and board and you will take over the cannon once you respawn. Alright, time to talk about neutral positions as the Cannoneer now. A neutral position means that you and your enemy are on an even playing field, meaning both teams have the same number of dead players, both teams' masts are in the same condition, both teams have the same kind of hull damage on each other, or both teams do or don't have cannon angle on each other. If you're both fully repaired with no one on your team dead and both you and your enemy have both of your masts up, you need to try to get yourself into a winning position by doing what I mentioned in the earlier parts of the Cannoneer section of this video. But let's say you're in a neutral position where you both have a dead player. They were unable to revive one of their teammates and you were unable to revive one of your teammates, and it's now a 2v2. If the dead player on your team is the helm, the Cannoneer essentially needs to become the flex, and the flex needs to become the helm until your helm is back alive. Then you get back to being the Cannoneer, and the flex goes back to being the flex. If the dead player is the flex, then the Cannoneer still takes over their role as flex until they are alive, and the helm stays as the helm. If both of your teammates are dead, and the enemy also has two dead teammates, become the helm of the boat. If the boat is operational, keep up the cannon pressure. If not, do the jobs of the helm. If the Cannoneer is the dead player, then the flex will stay as flex, and your helm will stay as helm. Now let's say you're in a position where both you and your enemy have one mast fully broken. If it's your back mast that's broken, don't worry about it and let the helm worry about it, unless they call you over to help with it for some reason. If it's your front mast that's fully broken, the Cannoneer and the flex need to communicate and say who will save it while the other one stays on cannon. Once it's saved from dropping, don't worry about repairing it and get back on cannon. If both you and your enemy have both of your masts dropping, then listen to your helm as they should be calling out whether you save the mast or not based off of the criteria I talked about in the helm section of this video. If they tell you to save the mast, then save it. If they tell you to not, then stay on cannons. If you want a review of how the helm will decide to make this call, then go to 2237 in this video, which is also the helm neutral positions part of this video, where I talk about 2 times masts being broken. Now let's talk about if both teams have cannon angle on each other. If this is the case, you need to keep up the pressure and get yourself in a winning position by killing an enemy, fully breaking the enemy's mast, or by putting way more holes in them than they have in you. Basically, just maintain the priorities I've already talked about. If both you and your enemy don't have cannon angle on each other, you need to shoot at the enemy with your sniper and try to kill one of them to put you in a winning position. As well, you should help upkeep the boat while your helm tries to get you angle. This means helping repair the wheel and masts as first priority and repairing the hull and bailing water as next priority, unless you're really close to sinking. Then prioritize bailing and repairing. If your boat is facing the enemy while you don't have cannon angle though, you can do the same thing, but you can also try to harpoon an enemy onto your boat if you want and kill them with your blunderbuss. But make sure that if you do this, you and your teammates are ready to 100% kill the enemy, or else it could put you in a bad position doing this. If you choose to get a kill by sniping, coordinate it with your team. Now that you're in a kill advantage winning position after killing an enemy, but you still don't have cannon angle, just help your helm upkeep the boat while you wait to get cannon angle. And lastly, if you're in a neutral position where both you and your enemy just have about the same amount of holes on each other, then try to get yourself into a winning position by getting a kill on the enemy or by breaking their masts. Do this before the enemy gets you into a losing position. Speaking of losing positions, let's talk about those. A losing position is when you don't have cannon angle on the enemy, but they do on you. You have more dead players than the enemy, your mast is broken or knocked down but the enemy's isn't, or there's more holes in your boat than the enemy. As I already talked about what to do if you don't have cannon angle on the enemy, we will talk about what to do if you have more dead players than the enemy on your team first. This means dead players that could still be revived. If your helm is dead, then tell the flex to revive them while you stay on cannon. If the flex is dead, the helm should be the one reviving them. If the cannoneer is dead, then the flex should be reviving them. If the helm has urgent priorities, but if the helm doesn't have urgent priorities, then the helm can do the reviving. If only one teammate is dead, the only time the cannoneer should revive them instead of your other teammate is if your other teammate tells you to because they have more urgent priorities, or if you don't have cannon angle. Otherwise, stay on the cannon. But let's say both teammates are dead and need revive. Then you need to revive the one closest to you, and then tell them to revive the other person while you keep up the cannon pressure and try to kill the enemy cannoneers. If you're unable to revive any of your teammates, then take up the role as the helm while you wait for your helm to respawn. Then go back to your role as cannoneer. Now what do you do if your mast is broken but the enemy's isn't? If it's the back mast, don't worry about it. But if it's the front mast, then listen for your helm's callout as to if you or your flex will need to save the mast or not. If you want a review on how they'll decide to make that callout, go to 2237 in this video. If they tell you to save the mast, then save the mast. But if they tell you to not, then don't. Then from here, if you have cannon angle, you need to get yourself into a neutral position by either killing an enemy, knocking the enemy's mast or mast down, or by putting way more holes into them than they have in you. Basically follow the logic I talked about earlier. But if you don't have cannon angle, then you'll need to try to coordinate with your team and snipe kill an enemy to put you in a neutral position. Now let's talk about what to do if you're in a losing position where you have more holes in your own boat than in the enemy boat. If a situation has happened where you need to take over the role as helm or flex, then do that. But if your role is still being cannoneer, then you need to get in a neutral position by using cannons to get the enemy's mast down, kill an enemy, or you need to return the pressure and get more holes in them than they have in you. I'd recommend prioritize getting a kill on the enemy for the same reasons I talked about earlier in the video, involving a kill being able to lead to completely immobilizing the enemy by using good coordination with your flex. If you can get a kill, you and your flex should be able to snowball that kill into getting the enemy's masts completely down, then getting a bunch of returning hull pressure on them, which will get you into a better position. Speaking of coordinating with your flex, I still need to go over how the flex position on a Brigantine actually works, so let's get into that. The flex is the role on the Brigantine, which is essentially a combination of the helm and the cannoneer. Your main job will be to keep up cannon pressure on the enemy along with the cannoneer. This means sinking the enemy by putting holes in their boat, immobilizing the enemy boat, and killing enemies with cannonballs. Your secondary job is helping the helm if they need it. This means upkeeping the boat with repairs and bails, and so on. Let's talk about how you should prioritize these jobs. The priorities of the flex change completely based off of the state of the battle which you are in. This means that by default your priorities are the exact same as the cannoneer unless your helm tells you otherwise. Rather than going over all of that again, you can go to 3049 in this video if you want a review on the Cannoneer Priorities. Up until your helm asks you for help, your jobs are the exact same as the cannoneer, except instead of using the front cannon, you use the back cannon. So let's now talk about how you should prioritize the jobs you'll need to do when not on the cannon. These jobs are saving and repairing masts, bailing and repairing the boat, and steering the boat. If the helm can't keep up with their priorities, they may call you to do one of these jobs, and you have to do whatever the helm doesn't have covered. Say the helm is worried about keeping cannon angle and needs to adjust the wheel, so they need help with the other jobs. If the boat is close to sinking, your first priority would be to bail and repair. But if it's not close to sinking, you should prioritize helping keep falling masts up, if the helm is unable to do so. The best way to sum this all up is if the helm calls you off of cannon, think of yourself as another helm. Have the helm's priority list in mind based off of the situation your team is in, and do the second most important priority because your helm should be doing the first most important priority. If for whatever reason your helm isn't doing the first most important priority, then you yourself should do it. If you want a review of Helm Priorities so you know what I'm talking about, go to 5 minutes and 20 seconds in this video. Now that we've covered the flex's priorities, let's talk about how they should be communicating with their team. When the flex is in the cannoneer role, they need to communicate everything the cannoneer would. If you want a full rundown of how the cannoneer should be communicating, then go to 3130 in this video and basically do the same. But to sum it up, you need to communicate to your Cannoneer where you're aiming for your cannonballs. This means whether you're going for kills, going for the enemy's masts, going for their wheel, or for holes. If your Helm calls you to help, let your Cannoneer know that they're now alone on cannon. Because if the Cannoneer is alone on cannon, they should be prioritizing kills so that they can have an even cannon engagement. When the Helm calls you over to help them, they will have told you what you need to do, whether it's bailing, repairing, and so on. Once you're doing the job that they asked you to do, make sure you verbally tell them that you're doing it so they don't have to worry. As well, because the Helm has to have a lot going through their mind to keep an optimal boat running, keep in mind that they're human, and they may call you over to do a job that isn't optimal within their priority list. If they do this, simply tell them that there's a more urgent problem to take care of, and that you're still going to help them, but you'll do the more urgent priority instead. This will ensure keeping the boat in optimal running condition while also not causing confusion when the job the Helm originally asked for isn't being done. You don't want to be in a situation where the Helm is worried about keeping boat angle while the backmast is going down and at the same time your boat is close to sinking, but the Helm tells you to save the backmast, so you blindly listen to them and then your boat sinks. This kind of communication will help prevent similar situations like that from happening. Because of you keeping the Helm's priorities in the back of your mind, your Helm will be happy that you just saved your guys' boat from sinking, and will also be happy that you told them why your guys' backmast fully fell down, rather than them assuming to blame you for letting the backmast fall down, when that shouldn't have even been a priority in the first place. Some extra miscellaneous things to keep in mind that you should be communicating as flex include things such as when you yourself die, when there's a dead enemy, if either of your own masts are broken, or if the wheel is broken, because potentially the Helm didn't hear that while bucketing on the boat. And you should also communicate if there's a person boarding, and whether you have it covered or not. Speaking of how you should deal with boarders and kill them as flex, let's talk about what loadout you should be using as the flex. As the Brigantine flex, you should be using the blunderbuss and sniper. Why? Because the blunderbuss is good for doing high damage to enemies that you harpoon onto your boat before they can react, as well as dealing with boarders, because of the high knockback. And the sniper is good for long range for trying to kill people on the enemy boat if you don't have cannon angle. Let's now talk about the intro to an hourglass fight. Before you even spawn in, you want to be ready by one of the front sail length adjustments, with your Cannoneer ready on the other front sail length adjustment. But why be here and not on the cannon? While your Helm is starting to turn the boat to the right, you immediately want to start raising the front sail all the way with your Cannoneer to turn nice and tight. Once the front sail is fully raised, immediately run to the back sail and raise it to half with your Cannoneer. Then you yourself will get on the backmost cannon, and your Cannoneer will get on the frontmost cannon, and then go from there. At this point, you're now a Cannoneer until your Helm needs your help. At the start of the fight, if your Cannoneer is going for kills, then you should go for demasting the enemy. If your Cannoneer is going for demasting the enemy, then you should go for kills. And then follow the same Cannoneer logic I talked about earlier in the video. If you want a rundown of that logic, go to 3347 in this video. It'll give you some really good clarity on what to do in the fight introduction. Now to talk about winning positions as the flex. What you do in a winning position as flex is exactly the same as what you do as a Cannoneer, but you have to keep in mind that you need to be available to help the Helm if they ask for it. And if they do, you need to stop acting as a Cannoneer. As well, don't go for boards on the enemy unless you confirm with your Cannoneer that you should. If you want to review what the Cannoneer should be doing in winning positions, then go to 3456 in this video. And while watching it, in your mind, replace the times I use the word flex with Cannoneer. The same is applicable for neutral positions. Do the exact same things the Cannoneer would do in neutral positions, but just keep in mind that you need to be available to help the Helm if they ask for it. And if they do ask you for help, you need to stop acting as a Cannoneer. If you want to review what the Cannoneer should be doing in neutral positions so you know how to do the same as flex, then go to 4030 in this video. Now for losing positions. Well, in a losing position as flex, you basically stay as a Cannoneer until your Helm calls for your help. If you want to review what a Cannoneer would do in different losing positions, then check out 4325 in this video. But in most bad losing positions, the Helm will always need your help. So if in the case your Helm does need your help, you basically become the secondary Helm and you'll have to do the same priorities as the Helm. And you'll do whichever top priority your Helm isn't doing. If your Helm is doing the number one priority, then you do the second most important Helm priority. And if for whatever reason the Helm is doing a less important priority, you will do the most important Helm priority and then tell your Helm that you got it covered, as well as communicate to them which priority they should do next. If you want to review how the Helm priority breakdown works, then go to 520 in this video. Now that we've gone over how every single Brigantine role works, let's talk about some Brig knowledge to keep in mind for all roles, as well as how you should set up your Brigantine before a battle. For starters, when you're loading up a new game session and you're going to be doing PvP, I would 100% recommend, if you have a captain boat, buy all the captain supplies, besides the grubs, because you don't really need those. If you don't have a captain boat or don't have the money to buy these supplies, don't worry about it, but it is super useful and super worthwhile. You can also buy the merchant supply crates to get things like extra wood, extra cannonballs, extra fruit, and a storage crate. For these, you don't need a captained boat, so take advantage of it. Buying the storage crate is essential for Brigantine PvP, which sounds weird, but let me explain. You're gonna sort your storage crate like this with a bunch of the supplies which you got. Why like this? Well, because you're gonna put it between your left side cannons. This will allow for the Cannoneer and the Flex to have quick access to the essentials, rather than having to run all the way downstairs to grab their supplies. By then you're already sunk. Like, buy the storage crate. I'd recommend sorting the storage crate like this, because when you quick grab items from a storage crate, you'll grab the first things in the storage crate first. So yeah, since the storage crate is going to be near cannons, you'll want cannonballs first, then chain shot, then blunder bombs, then your scatter shot, then your food, and then extra wood. If you happen to find a second storage crate, instead of putting your storage crate in the middle, you can put one right beside each cannon so you don't have to move at all to get your supplies. I'd also recommend having your inventory full of all your goodies before you even load into a battle. If you also decide to buy the wood crate from the merchant, I'd recommend putting it near the helm so that they have quick access to wood to repair their wheel as well as the masts. Now let's talk about some extra things involving the cannons. If you're doing hourglass PvP, before you even queue into a battle, you should preload your cannons so that you don't have to worry about it at the start of the battle. You can also keybind cannonballs, so when you press a key, it pulls a cannonball out into your hand. This is super useful because if your cannon line is getting suppressed by the enemy, you can use this, and you can load your cannon while dodging shots. The next extra tip involves how you should bucket the boat. You should bucket while looking towards the front of the boat, because this means that you can see the ladders, which means that you can see anyone boarding your boat. If you bucket facing the other way, you'll see none of this. As well, you can also throw water out through the grates of the boat. The only time you really want to do this is if your boat is stationary and not swaying a bunch. Speaking of the grates, while on top of the boat, you can look through the front grate to see the map table, so you don't have to run all the way downstairs to figure out where you're going. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, as well as share the video with others. If you want to watch more guides like this for other boats, check out either my solo sloop or duo sloop guide, which are on screen now or in the description. Also, you really should consider pressing the join button and joining the Bucket Chat army to support me being able to get out more guides like this one. If you made it this far into the video and watched it all, leave a comment saying large Bucket Chat. Thanks for watching and have a good one.